some familiar to TechKnowCon, and a lot of it seems like we have a lot of new members. So as we warm up, I'll just give you a little bit of a background on why we are here, who we are, what we do, that sort of thing. So some of you know the spiel. For the rest, it's going to be probably new. So today we're going to talk about generative AI and specifically how it applies to team enablement at usually tech-forward companies. And we have an awesome panel. We have a couple of large companies, Salesforce and Netflix representing, and then we also have EffectiveEDU as well as Mike here, who are seeing a lot across the industry, different companies. So we'll chat about that in a second. Before we introduce our panelists, I just want to give you some housekeeping. So in terms of how to participate, we recently moved to a new platform, so we use Session versus Zoom. So keep yourselves muted. I think that's automatic, but do feel free to use comments in chat. So I keep an eye on that. So if you have any questions as we keep on going, use chat, just send it to everyone, and we'll try to get to your questions toward the end, or maybe even pepper them through the panel conversation. If you have any technical issues, any questions, ping Tomomi. You probably heard from her already. She sent the introductions and invitations, and share TechKnowCon in general. So we'll talk about the upcoming events at the end, but it's exciting to also know that there's a community for people like you. So a little bit of a history. Back in late 2017-18, a couple of us, namely Rajan and Jenny from Salesforce, I see Rajan on the call, we noticed that there was a group of us who cared about technical enablement and everything that goes into that bucket, and I'll talk about that shortly. But yet we didn't have a community. We would get together every once in a while at somebody's office, kind of ad hoc, compare notes. And it was very impactful for us at the time because we were learning from one another. But we also wanted to kind of raise the bar and create a little bit of a community and a formal quote-unquote watering hole for knowledge sharing for program managers that manage technical education and such. So in 2018, we launched an event called TechKnowCon. It was meant to be a technical knowledge conference, and it happened in Sunnyvale at LinkedIn, and it was a full-day event. It was quite successful. So the year after, we repeated that at Twitter. So the photo that you see here is all of us at Twitter in 2019, just before pandemic started. Since pandemic, we moved online. So we now do a monthly roundtable, which this is an instance of, and we invite you to join us online. So in addition to monthly events, we also do, we have a Slack channel that you can partake. Tomomi will paste a link how to join the Slack channel, but it's basically how we keep in touch through the day. If anybody has questions, looking for a job, that sort of thing, it's a great place to share your thoughts. So that's a little bit about the history. We do have a board that helps organize everything behind the scenes. So like I said, you probably already met Tomomi. She sent the invites. Jasmine from Netflix will be presenting today, so she's part of a panel. I mentioned Rajan that helped get this off the ground way back in the day. Katie from back at the day Twitter also is one of the board members, as well as Chris from Microsoft, and Andrew, who is now with TD Bank. We met when he was at Shopify. So just a little bit of a background that there is a board managing what we do and what kind of events we come up with. So it's this particular event is directly a result of some brainstorming that we had. Just briefly, if you're new to this, we have guidelines, which are basically in a nutshell saying, this is a community for us, by us. So try to be a good member of the community. So that means a whole bunch of things, but respect each other's privacy. Do not solicit if you're selling goods and services. And be a good citizen, help create a safe place, that sort of thing. The website has more details if you care about the language, but this has worked for us so far. So I mentioned that I'm also going to do a plug for upcoming events. So Sean, who you will meet today, is also hosting a session on May 4th. And it's going to teach us how to lead like our favorite teachers. So it's more of a the aspects of learning and teaching and sharing that knowledge. And so that's for May. And then in June, we'll hear from Benji. Benji runs tech enablement at Slack, and he'll talk about how he is managing that. They're doing some really interesting things as well there. So I'm excited about that talk as well. So with that, we are going to just briefly mention what we mean by tech enablement, because you'll hear this term thrown around. I just want to kind of clarify it. So when we got together and said, hey, let's create a community for us by us to talk about how we do things, the things was a combination of everything from engineering onboarding to general knowledge sharing to peer collaborative learning to mentorship, coaching, office hours, documentation, and then finally, how do we measure things and know what we're doing well? So it was a combination of things that a program manager responsible for enabling technical folks primarily leans on to get the job done. And we understand that that bucket contains a whole bunch of things. So we call it tech enablement or team enablement. So that's the umbrella that everything falls under. So with that, we have a few folks here on the panel, and as opposed to me introducing them, I'll let them introduce themselves. So Tomomi, would you mind bringing them to the stage, and we can just go in the order of Sean, Mike, Atul, and Jasmine, I guess. So Sean, take it away.
All right. So first of all, really pleased to be here. Thank you for having me on this. And so I have about 20 years background in the field of education. I've been working as a teacher, teacher trainer, mentor. I've led an education team, an academic technology team at a school. I have an advanced degree in education, and I've worked in K-12 up through adult education. My most recent was a couple different companies that do career change education, otherwise known as boot camps, and where I was working on the educational product and changing the teachers into really expert teachers from the good teachers that we hired. And so all of this has sort of come to the point now that I've realized that what I really love about education is helping create incredible educational experiences in the classroom. And so I've started my own consulting agency called EffectiveEDU, and am open for business and doing basically bringing educational research and best practices into the classroom and into other areas of work up to and including the C-suite. So that's me.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. Mike, you want to go next?
Sounds good. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Excellent. Mike Hruska. I'm obsessed with this intersection between education and technology. I think much like Sean, and I think probably like everyone else here, has the ability to do so many interesting things. I'm a former researcher from the National Institute of Standards and Technology. My brother was a researcher there with me, and we've been just playing and building things with technology since we were kids. But this space of ed tech and data interoperability and mobility now with the onset of AI is super interesting. And so getting to play in many different kinds of spaces and see some really interesting use cases that are really effective and impactful in many ways. I'm excited to talk about it here today and to learn and share with everyone else.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Atul, on the next.
Hello, everyone. My name is Atul Kshirsagar. Super excited to be part of this panel. So I've been working in software for over 24 years, but for the last 4 years, I've been working as a software architect at Salesforce, where I have had the opportunity to contribute to development of our chatbots product. My current focus is building the generative AI stack, which is going to power the generative features in Salesforce suite of products. So looking forward to having a great and productive and engaging discussion here. That's me.
Awesome. Thank you. And I forgot to mention, Salesforce was one of the founding members of TechKnowCon. So way back, I mentioned Jenny Blackburn. So it's been they've been a great partner. And then Mike also spoke in the past, with us. So that's awesome. And Sean is coming up. This next month, yeah. And finally, Jasmine, who is also a board member. Yay.
Yay. So hello, I'm Jasmine Robinson. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a senior technical program manager at Netflix. I'm focused on engineering operations and developer education. Before Netflix, I was a director of IT in academia, and before that, I was a web application developer. And my favorite thing to do is to streamline processes with technology and translating complex ideas into successful projects. So, as a board member of TechKnowCon, I am passionate about enabling tech, and generative AI has become the latest way I am enhancing developer productivity.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Great to have you. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing the screen so that we can see each other better. And I'm gonna just have a question for each one of you separately. So the first one, and I just posted it in the chat as well, is for Jasmine, and it's really about how you're leveraging generative AI with respect to developer productivity, developer experience, that whole kind of like collection of tasks that you own at Netflix, and how do you kind of pepper in internal data to help train the model as well, so that it's a little more applicable to Netflix context?
So would you like me to answer the question in the chat about how we're doing things securely and confidentially, or how we're using generative AI at Netflix?
So how are you using generative AI at Netflix primarily? Yeah.
Okay, so we have
go ahead. Sorry.
So we have a couple ways that we're using generative AI. One is AI paired programming. We are currently piloting GitHub Copilot to assist our engineers by generating code. And we are also doing things like we created a virtual tech writer, and we built inside of Google Docs a ChatGPT API assistant that makes recommendations on how to improve your documentation. We are also doing it for self-service support. We're currently creating a chatbot that is trained on all of our documentation to assist with self-service support. We are building a SQL query generator, so we are automatically submitting our metadata about our tables to OpenAI, to ChatGPT, to create queries for us based on questions that we have. We're also hoping to empower our engineers with a series of hack days. So we have a couple days, 1 or 2 days a month, in which various teams have gotten together and they are using our OpenAI account in order to build applications within Netflix. And last but not least, we're trying to consolidate tools. So we realize that as we are implementing OpenAI, that we don't need, let's say, a jargon database, which we call our I don't know term lingo site. So what we can do is we can retire that. We might also be able to retire our knowledge base, which is our Q&A system.
That's awesome. And I love the application of feedback loops for technical documentation. I used to manage tech docs at Twitter, and I know how complex that can get very quickly. So, and how uneven it can get across teams. So having that feedback to both get it better and also get it more consistent is huge. So that's really good application. Love it. And one of the questions I had here was also with respect to confidentiality of information, privacy, all that stuff. And I see there's been a lot of questions in the chat as well about that. So how do you think about that?
That is a great question, because we are proceeding very cautiously as we're experimenting with third-party services, and I work closely with our legal and security teams. So I set up 6 guidelines that we follow, and I'm going to consider these best practices. So one is you want to ensure the vendor that you're using for generative AI has disabled the use of your data for their training. Second, you want to, if possible, remove your company name or any identifiable information in the data that you submit. For example, you can find and replace your company name with a regular expression. You want to ask your employees to consider the potential impact of their submissions. So if it were to end up on, let's say, Reddit or Twitter, what would be the impact to your company? Next, we established a vetting process for different use cases. And for example, how we do it is first you need to submit a one-page use case memo. That memo needs to include the data that you're going to be sending for that experimentation. Then we send that to our security and legal teams, and they assess the potential risks. And as we're building these use cases, we're finding that there's different ways in which we can safely experiment. And so we're building that out. One of the ways is it's okay for us to experiment on our open source repositories, but we would prefer that you don't use ChatGPT on our internal source code. Also, if we have an enterprise agreement with the vendor, we want to make sure, we want to make sure that our instance is isolated from everyone else's instance to try to protect our data from potential security issues. We will be more lenient if we have enterprise agreements. Let's see what else. We want to use solutions that have more enterprise controls. And one example of that is with GitHub Copilot. You have the ability to disable it from using licensed code. So right now in ChatGPT, if it makes a suggestion, you don't know if it was trained on code that it doesn't own and your company doesn't own. So you want to avoid potential legal complications down the line, in which case we ask our developers not to use ChatGPT and instead use GitHub Copilot. Last but not least, consider the potential risks the entire time, iterate, mitigate every step, every experiment that you're doing.
Got it. So this is one of those examples where technology is ahead of the legal approval cycle and all the other implications. So it's truly a wild west. So it's awesome to be on that cutting edge. I love it. We certainly don't want the Samsung incident to occur again, right? Some people know about that. Cool.
Yes, we
don't want to be
Samsunged.
There's a verb now, so that's awesome too. The next question I have is for Atul, and it's really about this realization that Gen AI is really, and sorry about the spelling there. Gen AI is really about most of the training model comes from public data, right? Things from the internet. Obviously, in the corporate context, it's much more valuable when we can train it with a private internal knowledge. And so how do you think about that? How do you consider those enterprise knowledge training models and pepper it into general Gen AI stuff?
Right, and that is such an important question for all enterprises. It's top of the mind. You ask it. I mean, we all know about the hallucinations that these models can generate, and in an enterprise setting, you don't want to give a wrong answer. So there is an estimate that ChatGPT can get up to 20% of the answers wrong. And they're very confident about it. And that's not what we want in an enterprise setting. So at Salesforce, we have been thinking about this very deeply. We want to use generative AI. It's obviously taken the world by storm, and it's fundamentally a revolutionary technology, and we want to leverage that. The important thing that we now are doing is something we call as domain adaptation. And what do we mean by domain adaptation is making sure that any prompt that we are sending to these foundational models or large language models are grounded in the data from our domain. In our case, it's CRM, but it can be extended to any other domain. And basically instruct the models that, you restrict your answers from within the context that we are sending you as part of the prompt. And models are very good and well trained to follow the instructions that you're giving them. And in our mind, there are different levels of this domain adaptation. It's just not like only prompt. So just to give you a quick overview of how this actually, the kind of different levels that we are thinking about. The first level we think about is, a very simple, which is, say, just a page context where you are on a web page or you are on a mobile screen or a desktop app, and you want to embed your generative, your generative functionality in there. And all the data that you need to generate responses is on that screen. So you just take that data, embed in your prompt, ask your models to generate it. Simplest form, I guess everyone does it. The second level is you are on a screen, but the data there is not sufficient to, generate the respective. So you need to perhaps reach into a database or any other documents that you want to do. There are different techniques to do that. You'll either do SQL queries or you will vectorize your data. So you can do semantic search and you can actually find the relevant data that is contextual. The third level of domain adaptation comes in where not only the data from your database is sufficient, you need some samples, old samples of maybe you're generating an email, so you need some email samples that needs to be included. So that becomes third level of domain adaptation. But all these tricks run out quickly because you have a token limit. So your prompts can only have so much data. So beyond this, where it gets more interesting and more expensive also, first is actually fine-tuning your models. And the first level of fine-tuning is, task-specific fine-tuning. So you have a label data set and you want to train your models on that particular task. So it's going to be a supervised learning. You have a proper label data set. The data set doesn't have to be too large and models will perform pretty well on that particular task. Second one, level of training is more deep model training, where you have lots of data from a domain and you throw it at the model in an unsupervised fashion. So you want to train these models in an unsupervised way so that they actually, understand the domain and updates their internal hidden layer weights so that they can respond properly. And obviously, the last level of fine tuning, the one that we are talking about, is most expensive. And OpenAI, for example, does not even let you fine-tune their GPT-3, GPT-4 models, even DaVinci 003. Right? You can only fine-tune up to GPT-2. But there are vendors other than OpenAI, which we are working with, and I know everyone thinks of OpenAI as the gold standard, and they are. But we have been working with other vendors who are ready to work with us to fine-tune that model. And that is where even what Jasmine was earlier talking about, the data privacy and concerns get a little bit further reduced because we can host those models within our own, if you're AWS VPC or within your own data center. So the risk goes down. But I think all the things that she mentioned about data privacy exactly are the same guiding principles that Salesforce has been using. But yeah, so that's how in general, I think you can constrain the models to the domain that you are so that they don't invent stuff and make you look bad.
Got it. So what I got out of this is that we can basically start today by copy pasting the level 1, right? Like, and kind of get better at it over time as we want to invest into enriching the models.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Very cool. So that's good to know. And the key is really, again, to empower models to securely know about our internal context, our internal knowledge, right? So that it's more appropriate.
Right.
Cool. Thanks, Atul. So the next question maybe for Mike. How do you think about Gen AI disrupting the current thinking and models of organizational design?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, everything that Jasmine was talking about, you just think about the extensions of what the changes are that's related. Atul, the things that you're referring to, they're cascading effects through organizations. Thomas Malone from MIT Center for Collective Intelligence said, from humans in the loop to computers in the group. And so the pairings that we're going to get in the future of one-on-one working or teams working or teams being coordinated by AI are extremely interesting, but as disruptive and positive as they are, they're extreme game changers in terms of productivity and output and the way that we think about processes. And so looking back to kind of look forward, we should look at other places that were significantly disrupted, like manufacturing and other ways to think about the human-machine partnership, because the tool shapes the operator and the operator shapes the tool. And as we launch more of these functional units, you could see them ranging not just from fulfilling use cases in a department, but between departments, between organizations, along the supply chain. So there's a ton of we'll say, general change management. A stat that I heard recently thrown around was it takes about $10 to implement $1 of technology. And if that is indeed the case, we have a ton of change to think about. So while I'm so excited about what the technology is doing, really interested to see, how organizations think about new models for processing artifacts, creating artifacts in the organization, and rather than deconstructing the idea of a job, really deconstructing the idea of work. So I think there's a ton of reconstruction of work that we have in front of us to be thoughtful about.
Got it. And I love this, like we're sort of like looking at what the innovative companies like Netflix and Salesforce are already doing, and then kind of dialing that back into what does the organizational design look like for that. And then finally, one of the questions that comes up is, how do you think about, and this is maybe for Sean, how do you think about the early careers? Like, what kind of people do we need to then bring into this organizational design so that they can be effective in the future of Gen AI at work, which some of us are already living in that future. So Sean, any thoughts on that?
Sure, yeah, and I think probably everyone here has thoughts on that. My first thought is, are we still going to be employing humans? And hopefully we will. So assuming that's the case, then we're going to be looking for people who know how to intentionally enhance their work with AI. And we're going to need people who are idea evaluators and curators and not just producers, because 10 years from now, when you think about the growth of AI and where it's come from already and how fast it's moving, 10 years from now, AI will be an idea creator. It already is, but at that point, it could be indistinguishable from a human. And so what do the humans do with that? Well, we need to figure out how to use it and what's good and what should be incorporated into the work and into the products they're building. So I would say, in addition to the base knowledge and skill that we currently look for in our early stage employees, we're also going to be looking really heavily at tech facility and AI facility, and basically the ability to enhance, to use that enhancement of your knowledge and skill in a really positive way.
Got it. Yeah. And one of the questions that kind of, maybe this is selfish that comes to me, I'll just post it here, is how do you think the schools will change, right? Like having young kids and looking how they're leveraging all this. So we're like going even further into the chain.
Sure.
What's going to happen there?
Well, yeah, and Mike, as well as Jasmine and Atul, have talked about disruption, and I mean, we're seeing it right now. It's already disrupted education to a very large degree, partly fear-based, because there is a huge potential for problems if we don't adjust, but there's also a really, really huge potential for use of this for good. But to start with, the current fear in education is cheating. I'll just say it right out there. The problem that we're facing in education is not that AI, I mean, it is that AI makes it possible to cheat easier, but that's not actually the problem. That's a symptom. The problem is that students don't like stupid assignments. And so if we think that students aren't using generative AI on take-home essays or tests or potentially even work that they're doing in class, we're crazy, because all of the old writing prompts, compare and contrast, Hamlet and Laertes, whatever, those were no longer valid as of months ago. So it was already, before ChatGPT came along, it was already easy to cheat. You could plagiarize, you could maybe modify the thing you plagiarized, and maybe you wouldn't get caught. Turnitin.com made a whole business out of that. But now it's even easier. You give an AI the prompt, and you won't get caught, especially if you go and make modifications or integrate that with your own work. And so that, if that's unaddressed, that is a massive negative for education, because we would be outsourcing creativity and knowledge and skill that we actually need to be raising our kids to do. Okay, so I've addressed the elephant in the room, but we cannot just say don't allow AI into education. That's a knee-jerk reaction. It's actually dangerous. And it was horrifying to me to see the New York City public school ban on ChatGPT. They actually forbade their students from using it. They completely blocked access to it at the school. That brings up issues of equity. The students who rely on the school technology no longer have access, but the wealthier students certainly do on their cell phones and outside of school and all of that stuff. But it also removes the possibility of teaching how to use this. And so I said earlier that students don't like stupid assignments. They do like thoughtful ones. And so what we need to be doing in education is considering how to build assignments that acknowledge the existence of AI and also incorporate it. Because AI can't write about your personal experience. It can't write in your own voice and style, at least not for now. And students really want to be able to invest themselves in their assignments. And so one of the ways that I see generative AI disrupting the education space is bringing in this very needed reevaluation of what we are doing through assignments with our students. Now, that said, got to be careful. AI brings in plenty of bias and errors, and particularly if you're using it for feedback to the students, there's the real risk of giving feedback that takes them off in the wrong direction. And so we have to be really careful with that. Exactly, Danielle, lifelong learning. And so, you know, we can't just trust the AI. We have to do it really intentionally. But how do we do it, right? So there are some huge positives that come about from bringing generative AI into a classroom. One of them is that one of the big things that we try to do in education is to build metacognitive skills. And so that means thinking about thinking. And so that can be done really well through evaluation of AI writing. So you create some real quick prompts as a teacher. You say, give me 10 examples of how to write about this prompt, and you give it to students and you say, which is better, or which of these addresses the way that we've learned to write, or which of these, how would you modify one of these, whatever that is, but you get them to think about the work that's produced. We also are trying to build students who have both understanding and skill, right? Not just knowledge, not just the ability to do something, but actual understanding and skill. And quite frankly, AI has the potential to replace those things if we're not careful. And so we need to build students who can compete with it. And so just today, I actually spoke with someone about partnering on a project that includes building an AI feedback system as part of a course. And there's some incredible benefits to that. You increase the speed of feedback almost infinitely, right? You also increase the ability to scale that feedback. And those are huge for education because so much work, so much of the teacher's time is spent just trying to keep up with all of the assignments and giving feedback and giving personal attention and all of that stuff. They never have enough time for that. And so bringing in AI, obviously there's that potential of cheating, but it also allows for the teacher to scale their ability to give feedback to the students, to build new prompts for the students, all of that kind of stuff. And then, okay, so say they do this, they bring this in and they know that students might be using AI. What do? Well, one thing that we can do in education, it's really not that difficult. We have a thesis-based a thesis defense approach that we use in higher ed that we should be applying everywhere in education. And so that means when you go and get your master's or your PhD, you don't just write the paper, you actually have to defend it. And that's where the people who are evaluating you actually get to see how you think in real time. And we can do this in a classroom, right? It just means, it does mean more time. I'm not saying that this is easy, but it means that the student writes the paper and then has to defend it in live conversation. And so then there's no way that AI, up until it's actually in our heads, there's no way that AI can actually speak for the student, and you get to see what the student contributed. And I've used this successfully in the past when I've asked students to essentially defend their writing. You see really quick the students who are not able to do that, and that allows you, unfortunately, to catch the cheaters, but that's a really necessary thing when something like this makes cheating so possible. We tweak the way we go at it, and we can actually create a better educational system around it.
Yeah, that's awesome. It just reminds me, I was at MIT last week for a conference, and as you imagine, Gen AI was a huge topic. Everyone's like asking, like, hey, how does this apply to my business? And I spoke with the Jason Pfeiffer. He wrote a book called Built for Tomorrow, and it's all about how do you think about future-proofing your products, right? Mm. And his thing is like, there are things that change and there are things that don't change, right? So using it in the context of kids and learning and Gen AI, right? Things that change is how we evaluate the kids, right? So as a teacher, I might have asked them to write an essay in the past to evaluate their knowledge, right? that may change with the Gen AI. Maybe that's an outdated model of evaluating. To your point, defending is maybe more appropriate. And
Well, it actually has to.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, it actually has to change. We
Yeah.
cannot go at this and say that the old methods of assignment and evaluation are going to continue to work. They will not. They already don't. And what we need to be doing is thinking about how to evaluate the students' work really, really intentionally. And so we have to split that evaluation. There has to be an evaluation of the students' ability to think and do without AI, their own ability to be creative. Unfortunately, some schools are going to a mode of, okay, so we'll just use pencil and paper in the classroom in view of the teacher, and now you can't cheat. And that is really not the best way to do this. But we have to figure out good ways to do that. And then we have to be able to evaluate student thinking and doing with that AI assist. But we have to be able to split these things, because otherwise we're outsourcing creativity in our students, and we're going to end up with people who can't compete with AI.
Yep, got it. That's awesome. And so in lieu of that, since this community is mostly about enabling employees, so it's sort of analogous to like teaching kids. We're just enabling employees. How do we think, and this is open to all of you on the panel, how do you think about using Gen AI to kind of enhance that, that activity of tech enablement, team enablement across and your workforce primarily, or if your client's workforce? So anybody particularly wants to share?
I can take a first go at it. So at Salesforce, I'll give an example of a few of the use cases that we are considering. The first wave of use cases that we are going to support are all going to be human in the loop. I think everyone knows that right now. Technology is not there yet where you can just completely automate. So we want to have human in the loop. But the kind of tech enablement as well as productivity improvement things that we are going to provide as part of our feature set is, that Salesforce supports sales as a domain, supports service as a domain. And there are these sales agents who wants to convert and lead into an opportunity. They need to send an email. So obviously, Gen AI is a very great fit there. You will be able to auto-generate an email, personalize it for a particular thing. So you basically improve, their productivity by allowing them to quickly bootstrap and send an email. Same thing goes for a service agent. I'm sure all of you have an experience where you're talking to a customer service agent and then you call them and you're on hold for a long time. So guess what? Now we will have Gen AI help those agents to respond to your queries. So and they can respond based upon the context. You can embed all the ways that I talked about earlier can be used here, so that the replies that are coming from an agent will now be recommended by generative AI technology. And the agent can either select and send directly, or they can edit if they don't feel it is right. So now that improves the productivity of our service agents, and you free them up from the mundane task, and now they are actually more enabled to handle complex queries and have more meaningful and fulfilled tasks, rather than keep continuously answering the same type of questions from 100,000 different people. And we are gonna improve for the marketeers to generate subject lines. We are going to improve for the store managers who are managing the online storefronts to generate product descriptions. We are going to empower service agents to automatically create knowledge from the chat transcripts that have happened. So there is an issue that has happened, you have chatted, you have resolved it. Hey, Gen AI can now create a knowledge, contribute it to a knowledge base, so that other agents, bots, can use it to answer effectively. As well as in sales agent, when they finish their call, can have a call summarization and actually use. So the main problem with CRM today is because people don't want to enter anything into CRM. With this, now you can actually enable them to enter it faster, and then the data quality goes up. And I think all of this is going to improve and empower all our users. And I'm super excited where this is going to take us.
Got it. So it's like just in time sort of empowerment in the flow of work, and
Right.
like you're giving them fish when they need it, to use that analogy from just education.
If I can add to that, it's known through educational research and just brain science that feedback in the moment is far more impactful than feedback in sort of the medium to long term. And so thinking about how this can improve tech enablement or training and development, or even things like onboarding or whatever, being able to give that feedback in a really scalable way in real time is huge. And one of the things that I'm really excited about for both education and training and onboarding and all of that is the ability to start to even go beyond what we currently have with AI, which I'm sure is in the works somewhere, but instead of having it respond to text, having it respond to voice or to video or things like that, being able to train an AI system that can then give feedback to somebody in a training scenario and say, in that moment, you're doing something well, or in that moment, here's what you need to change. As long as we've built a way that we can really trust it or validate it, at least in the close proximity to the feedback, that's incredible for training. And so I love what I'm hearing about that in the moment training. Jasmine put it in the chat earlier that they're doing this as well. And that use of it for instant feedback is huge. And I hope that keeps going.
Yeah, I love the feedback aspect of it. I'm just wondering, like, is there like a fine line between a feedback and a crutch, right? Like where they just want the fish, and not necessarily an improvement in how they're learning. So yeah, I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts, Jasmine or Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone loves feedback until they get too much of it. And this is I love the idea when you were talking earlier, Sean, about the concept of feedback. There's so many places along the tech enablement life cycle, from the onboarding to technical skill development, performance support on the ways that you can have augmented intelligence teams with bots, working with them, in highly productive ways. But the question is, what is that sort of balance? I have some research project I'll be kicking off later this year, looking at that kind of problem. How often do you really want something talking to you, telling you how you're doing and how you're not doing, what you might be doing, or maybe you should change your voice or other things? I think it's a fascinating area. I mean, imagine if you had a little voice in your head, my little Bluetooth sticker or something. If it talked to me 37 times a day, that might be just too much. But then I might need it, though. You never know. So there's a lot of very interesting design implication questions that are out here in the future.
I would love to see that research when you have it.
Cool. Jasmine, anything to add? I know you already shared in the chat.
Yeah, I was a part of onboarding. Some of the feedback that I got this week was that the onboarding was awesome, but I'm not going to remember it. So that's why it is really important to provide them the information they need when they need it, when they're blocked. So there are 3 questions that I'm focused on how I can improve the onboarding experience using generative AI. One is, what am I teaching that could potentially be automated by AI? Maybe I shouldn't even be teaching this anymore. What can I abstract away that's going to enhance the engineering experience? And how can I get the information that they need when they need it so they can become unblocked? So I think if you follow those 3 questions, it will really help you create a strategy for how you can use generative AI to assist with your onboarding.
Got it. And I love that you're asking questions as opposed to providing answers. And so I have a question to a question, which is one of my favorite questions. And I'm kind of building up on Rajan's favorite question, which is like, how do we measure effectiveness of all this? So we do things, right? We implement programs. We think that adding Gen AI or ChatGPT is going to make the experience better for people, so they're going to learn what they need and so on. And how do we make sure that actually is working? Any feedback loops to confirm or the results of this? Yeah.
I knew this question was going to be asked, and I was sure Rajan was going to ask it too. So thank you, Rajan. So right now we're using GitHub Copilot, and we're doing a 3-month pilot. And they were nice enough to provide us with a spreadsheet to help us calculate ROI. And how they do that, some of the variables in this equation are, one, how many hours a week do your engineers spend for actually developing code? And I would say probably at Netflix, maybe 50%. And then the next is like, how much time off do they take a year? And again, at Netflix, we've got unlimited vacation. So I'll say, okay, at least 6 weeks. And then, well, how many of your engineers do you think are going to adopt this Copilot technology? And I'm going to say we have a lot of senior level, high level engineers that might not even need it. So maybe we'll say 60% are going to adopt it. So use that to help you calculate what your ROI is based on how much you pay each engineer hourly. I like math, so hopefully that helps.
Hey, what gets measured gets improved, right? So that's why I love this line of questions. Anybody else to anything to add?
Yeah, I want to add. So the way we think about this is that what impact it has on the business outcome. So we do not actually see, using technology for the sake of technology. So let's take an example. If we talked about, generative reply recommendations for service agents, how fast are these agents able to close their cases compared to with this technology, without this technology? Now that's a concrete measurement that I have, that actually our customers are going to use. Hey, if I want to pay extra for this technology to be part of Salesforce, what impact it has on my business, and how are they going to measure it? Has my productivity improved? Has my service agents gotten more productive? Are they more efficient? Same thing for sales. And I think at the end of the day, when all said and done, business outcomes is what's going to determine impact of this technology. I mean, ChatGPT came out. It was a fun toy for everyone to play with. But after a while, the novelty will die down unless and until it actually impacts your bottom line and impacts your business outcomes. It's not gonna be useful. But obviously, this is a transformative technology and it has its use. But I believe that business outcomes and measured per domain differently how this technology impact will be measured.
Got it. Thanks, Atul. Any other thoughts or?
I mean, I think if you look at it longer term, there's always the efficiency and productivity stuff. If you get the CFO measuring stick out, it's going to be what's revenue per employee or expense per employee. And those are great lagging measures over time. The earlier measures are you doing it right? The measures of performance along the way. And that's going to be developer happiness and thanks, Rajan, and a bunch of other things like that are really meaningful in terms of measuring the human dimension of this. Because I think if we forget about that, we're not going to create a culture where that's seen as valued. And I think it's dangerous. And so financial productivity, those are great measures, but also individual happiness and productivity are really important to consider. Good thing is there's so many things to measure.
Got it. And I love this next question that from Stephanie. And it kind of leads into that leading versus lagging indicators. Totally agree with you, Mike. So productivity, revenue, blah, blah, that's all downstream from, are employees really engaged? Are they in the state of flow? And so on. So how is that helping productivity and that sense of productivity and accomplishment? So any thoughts on that for anybody on the panel? Back to that plugging it into the flow of work, right?
Yeah, and I'm thinking about how awful it would be if I had feedback popping up constantly. So Stephanie, I really hope that's not the case. And Mike, I think you're going to have some thoughts probably because you're doing the research on this. But my thinking is that it has to be really intentional, and it has to be really targeted, and it has to be aimed at the sort of highest value things to give feedback or suggestions on. And so my hope is that as we develop ways for this to be integrated into the workflow, because I do believe that human work with AI assistance is incredibly powerful, but it's not going to be if it's constantly interrupted. And so I think, you know, I hope that as this is developed, that people are really giving thought to that and thinking about, well, okay, so how does the AI evaluate what's going to, if it were to change, what's going to give the best effect of the change? And that's sort of what a teacher tries to do, right? A teacher can't give constant feedback. It would drive the students absolutely bonkers, the same way that having a pop-up window saying, hey, you didn't type this so well, can I fix it for you, would drive you nuts. Like, think about Clippy from years ago. But the teacher's job in many ways is to think about, where am I trying to get this student to go to, right? What's my outcome? What are the learning objectives? What do I need to change in order to get them further towards those objectives? And I think that's something that the AI is going to be able to do really well, whether it's in a workplace environment or whether it's in a school, is to be able to, in a very quick period, evaluate what are the things that, if they were to change, would have the biggest impact on our outcomes, and then integrate the feedback at that point. But yeah, I don't want to live in a world where I get feedback every 3 seconds.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think this is where the user experience comes into picture. It's something popping up is definitely not a great user experience all the time. So when you want to have this feature or this kind of functionality embedded in your product, you definitely have to work very closely with user experience, conversation designers, to make sure that, you know, this doesn't disrupt the flow of the person. It's there to assist them, not to disrupt them. So there are clever ways that you can address this. And we just have to be mindful when we are designing any kind of these features, that you're not in their face, but you're there to assist them.
I think the feedback will kind of be like spell check is for us right now, like a little red wavy line to let us know that maybe we could do something better, as opposed to being disruptive.
Yeah, I love that. Assist, don't not disrupt. From yeah, well said. Thank you. So we're talking about how we help employees, right? But one of the elephants in the room is, like, at some point, do employees feel that this thing that we're building is going to replace them, right? Like, and so there's a level of possible level of fear there. So how are you thinking about that? So Andrew asked this question. Better, Andrew is a board member as well from TD Bank. So with AI transforming and potentially replacing jobs, what's the role of technology enablement in addressing employee fears related to AI?
So I wear my rose-colored glasses, and it's my belief that AI will help automate some of the tasks that they prefer not to do, like the tech debt that we have, or automating documentation, and that will free them up to do projects that are more innovative that they enjoy doing.
Anybody else?
I mean, there's a lot of fear in education about this right now, and we don't know exactly where this is going to be in 10 years. So it's hard to say, no, it's going to be fine. AI is not going to take your job as a teacher, because we don't know where this thing is going. And it honestly could at some point take all of our jobs if it's developed, you know, with that in mind. What I'm hopeful of is that the build out of the AI and the way that people are thinking about how humans should interact with this technology is going to favor the sort of creativity and innovative thinking that comes from a human brain that is really difficult to train into a large language model. And that, you know, in education, thinking about how this can, it's sort of what Jasmine said, thinking about we don't have a term for it like this, but the ed debt, right? The grading and assessment of papers and the feedback and all of that stuff that takes the teacher away from actually working with the student on the biggest things. It's sort of what's behind the move that some people have made towards a flipped classroom, if you've heard of that expression, where you teach through video content and reading and things like that in advance of a class, and then you come in and actually workshop during the class. And it frees the teacher to facilitate instead of just deliver information. And there's problems with that, and you have to do it really intentionally and really well. But I'm hopeful that AI would bring the same sort of affordances to a teacher to be able to step back from some of the stuff that takes so much of their time and really focus on the stuff that's most impactful. And I would hope that the same thing would be happening in the workforce, in corporations as well, thinking about enablement.
Yeah,
I agree with your rose-colored glasses, Jasmine. I have those too, but at the same time, I mean, we have those challenges. And so, I mean, the conversations that I try to spark are what would more meaningful work look like in the future for you, for your team, for others? Because if it's not defined and it just turns into an efficiency project, it will move far away from the rose-colored glasses. And we don't want to do that. We want to give people meaningful, purposeful work alongside or with AI. The challenge is, it doesn't take intelligence to do that. It takes wisdom. And that's where we need to be the smart humans in the room.
Yeah, so, I mean, the same kind of discussions happen every time there is a technology coming on the horizon. I think all of you have heard about Excel came along. People thought accountants are going to lose their jobs. But guess what? Accountants moved on to doing better serving their clients because now they started providing more value-added services. I believe the same thing is going to happen here, where we as a society need to evolve into doing in higher order functions rather than doing the lower order mundane task, which we can automate using AI. Yes, there will be some short-term pain because people who are earning based on doing those wages might get automated out, and that's where, as a knowledge-based society, we need to keep reinventing and re-educating ourselves to align with the newer world order that's going to happen. And no matter what we say, it's coming. So we need to prepare for it. So yeah, so not as rose-colored as Jasmine, but I think I see there might be a short-term pain, but in the long term, we might evolve into giving more value-added functions to society.
Yeah, I go back to that book, Built for Tomorrow, and thinking in terms of what are things that are absolute truths that don't change, and what are things that change. So, and then going back to things that don't change, and defining our jobs around that, like educating kids doesn't change, but then evaluating them through having them write essays, well, that may be mutable, right? That may be an outdated model. So kind of thinking through that lens. And I just want to, somebody reminded me of the 19th century England, when there was a oath-based society called Luditis that was basically swore to destroy all the loom machines because they were going to take their jobs away. Right. So this is not the first time we have a technical revolution, and we can look at the history and how that played out. So yeah, there are different ways.
Yeah, can I piggyback on that? Because that same sort of thing has been going on in education with educational technology for many years. And there was a period where radio was going to become the teacher, and then movies were going to become the teacher. And we all remember what happened with the film reels, whatever those things were called. There's the flip to that, though, is that this is the first time that we've encountered an educational technology that actually can replace thinking, and not, or at least the perception of thinking, and not just do things that are sort of flashy or in a different way. The difference here, as I see it, is that where things like radio and even up to computers in their early adoption, they were just a different way of delivering information. And what then computers changed into was a different way of interacting with the information. And what AI has now brought is a different way of producing the information. And so that's a thing that, as I see it, is the real danger of this, is that if we don't, in education and in the rest of the world, if we don't get ahead of this and really think about how this thing is incorporated into our work as educators, as technologists, as whoever, it has the very real potential to replace us. And so I guess coming back to that question about the fear and how you address it, I think that a big part of that for me is being able to look someone in the eye and say, yeah, you know what, you're right. If we don't do anything, this is going to come for your job. So we better do something. Let's figure out the ways that we can use this in the classroom with our students for your own benefit. Because if we don't do that, yeah, that is going to happen.
And do that with the rose-colored glasses. So
and hopefully in a nice rose-colored glasses sort of way.
yeah, awesome. I'm just being cognizant of time, and just wanted to also make sure that we close that. With that, I wanted to thank you all. I know there were some other questions, and we can also address them offline or via Slack as well. Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for this conversation. It's been really insightful. It seems like there's a lot of sort of questions that we can kind of double click and go deeper into, and we'll try to do that through the community as well. So with that, thank you all for participating, and I'll see you next this month later on for May 4th talk with Sean as well. So we'll double click more onto impact on education and how to focus on things that don't change, such as leading like your favorite teacher.